The communication alert pierced through the steady hum of the transport ship's engines, jolting Commander Jake Sullivan from his contemplation of the star-scattered void beyond the viewport. Beside him, Chief Mechanic David Carter looked up from the maintenance report he'd been reviewing, his weathered hands pausing over the holographic display. Priority transmission from Kepler Station 7, the ship's AI announced in its characteristically neutral tone. Jake exchanged glances with David. Kepler 7 was barely a speck on the galactic map, a remote research outpost that served as a diplomatic way station between human and Velran territories. Neither man had reason to expect communications from such a distant location. "Accept transmission," Jake commanded, straightening in his command chair. The holographic projector shimmered to life, revealing a figure that made both men's breath catch simultaneously. The woman who appeared before them possessed the distinctive ethereal beauty of the Velran people. Luminescent pale blue skin that seemed to glow with inner light, silver hair that moved as if underwater, and those unmistakable large violet eyes that held depths of ancient wisdom. "Kira," David whispered, his voice barely audible. Commander Sullivan felt his pulse quicken. 3 years. It had been 3 years since he'd seen that face, since he'd held those delicate hands in his own during the darkest hours of the Velran. "Plague crisis. Jake, David." Her voice carried the same musical quality he remembered, though now it held an undertone of something he couldn't quite identify. Urgency, perhaps, or fear. "I need you both to come to Kepler 7. There is something you must know." The two men looked at each other, unspoken questions passing between them. Both had served during the humanitarian mission to Valethra Prime, when the deadly Crimson Fever had threatened to wipe out entire colonies. Both had worked closely with Kira, who had served as their cultural liaison and guide through the crisis. "Kira, what's wrong?" Jake leaned forward, his commander's instincts activated by the tension in her posture. "Are your people in danger? Again?" She shook her head, her silver hair catching the light. "No, my people are well. This concerns us. What happened during the mission?" Her violet gaze shifted between them. "I have kept something from you both, something I should have revealed long ago." David's engineering mind immediately went to technical possibilities. "If this is about the quantum field generators we installed, the modifications should still be holding—" "It's not about the technology," Kira interrupted gently. "It's about what we shared. What we created." The word created hung in the air like a physical presence. Jake felt his mouth go dry as implications began forming in his mind, while David's face had gone pale beneath his usual tan. "I have a daughter," Kira continued, her voice growing softer. "She is 2 years old now, and she is half human." The silence that followed was deafening. Jake gripped the arms of his chair, his knuckles white, while David had completely forgotten the maintenance report floating before him. "The Velran reproductive system is complex," Kira explained, her cheeks taking on a deeper blue tint that Jake recognized as the equivalent of a human blush. "When we form deep emotional and physical bonds during times of intense stress, our bodies can respond in ways that surprise even our scientists." "You're saying," David's voice cracked slightly, "you're saying one of us is the father?" Kira nodded slowly. "But I cannot determine which one without advanced human genetic technology. Velran physiology conceals such information until birth, and even then our medical scanners cannot differentiate between similar human genetic markers." Jake stood abruptly, pacing to the viewport. The stars that had seemed so peaceful moments, Ego now felt like accusatory eyes. He remembered his time with Kira during the plague crisis, the late nights working to coordinate relief efforts, the moment when professional cooperation had shifted into something deeper, more personal. The memory of her skin against his, soft and warm despite its alien luminescence, made his chest tighten. Behind him, David was struggling with his own memories, the brilliant alien woman who had worked alongside him to modify their medical equipment, who had understood complex engineering principles with startling intuition, the night when exhaustion and shared purpose had dissolved into tender intimacy under Valethra's twin moons. "We'll come," Jake said finally, turning back to face the hologram. "Both of us." Kira's relief was visible, her rigid posture softening slightly. "Thank you. I have prepared quarters for you both. And Jake, David, I want you to know that whatever we discover, I have never regretted what we shared. Any of it." The transmission ended, leaving the two men alone with the weight of this revelation. In the space of a few minutes, their understanding of the past had been completely rewritten, and both realized that their lives were about to become far more complicated than either had imagined. The journey to Kepler-7 took 18 hours, giving Jake and David ample time to wrestle with memories they had carefully buried. As their ship approached the station's docking bay, neither man had spoken much beyond necessary operational communication, each lost in recollections of that pivotal mission 3 years ago. The Velran plague crisis had begun as a routine humanitarian deployment. The Crimson Fever, a virulent pathogen that attacked the nervous system of Velran physiology, had erupted across 3 colonies simultaneously. Human medical technology, with its advanced quantum healing matrices, offered the only hope for a cure. Jake remembered arriving on Valethra Prime to find entire cities in quarantine. The usual pale blue luminescence of Velran skin had been replaced by angry crimson patches that spread like wildfire. Kira had met them at the spaceport, her violet eyes filled with desperation as she explained the scope of the crisis. "Commander Sullivan," she had said, her voice steady despite the chaos around them. "My people are dying. We need your help." For 3 months they had worked around the clock. Jake coordinated relief efforts while David modified human medical equipment to interface with Velran biology. Kira served as their bridge between species, translating not just language, but entire concepts of healing and hope. The breaking point had come during the 5th week. A children's medical facility had been overwhelmed, and Jake found himself working alongside Kira through the night, watching young faces that reminded him heartbreakingly of human children. When a little girl had died in Kira's arms despite their efforts, Jake had held the alien woman as she wept, her tears glowing faintly in the dim light. "I cannot lose any more of them," she had whispered against his chest. "You won't," he had promised, his hand stroking her silver hair. "We'll find a way." That night in the small quarters they had been assigned, comfort had transformed into something deeper. Jake remembered the wonder in Kira's eyes as she traced the contours of his face, studying the differences and similarities between their species. Her skin had felt like warm silk, and when she had kissed him, it was with a desperation born of grief and hope intertwined. "Your species fascinates me," she had murmured as they lay together afterward. "So much passion, so much determination. Your people are stronger than you know," Jake had replied, pulling her closer. "We'll get through this together." Meanwhile, David's connection with Kira had developed along different lines. His engineering expertise had been crucial in adapting human technology for Velran use, and Kira's intuitive understanding of quantum mechanics had impressed him deeply. She could grasp complex technical concepts with startling speed, often offering insights that improved their designs. "How do you understand these principles so quickly?" David had asked one evening as they worked to calibrate a new batch of healing matrices. "My people think in patterns," Kira had explained, her fingers dancing over the holographic controls. "We see connections that others might miss. Your technology, it sings to us." Their relationship had built on intellectual admiration that gradually became emotional intimacy. David remembered the night when exhaustion had finally overtaken them both. They had been working for 36 hours straight when Kira had collapsed against his shoulder, her luminescent skin dim with fatigue. "Rest," he had told her, carrying her to the small cot in their makeshift laboratory. "Stay with me," she had requested, her hand clutching his. "I cannot bear to be alone with the thoughts of who we might lose tomorrow." What had begun as comfort had evolved into tender exploration. David remembered marveling at the way her skin seemed to glow brighter when he touched her, how her violet eyes had darkened with emotion as they discovered each other. Unlike his encounter with Jake, which had been born of crisis and desperation, David's intimacy with Kira had grown from mutual respect and genuine affection. "You see beauty in function," she had whispered as they lay entwined. "That is why our machines sing for you." Both relationships had continued throughout the crisis, overlapping in ways that none of them had fully acknowledged at the time. The plague had created an atmosphere where normal social conventions seemed irrelevant compared to the immediate need to save lives. Kira had been grieving for her people, Jake had been driven by his protective instincts, and David had found purpose in their shared technical challenges. The breakthrough had come in the final weeks when they successfully created a hybrid treatment that combined human quantum healing with Velran energy manipulation. The plague had been defeated, but the emotional bonds forged in that crucible had left all three forever changed. As their ship docked at Kepler 7, Jake and David finally acknowledged what they had both been thinking during the journey. "We both loved her," David said quietly as they prepared to disembark. Jake nodded, his expression grim. "And apparently one of us created a life with her." The docking bay doors opened to reveal Kira waiting for them, no longer wearing the simple robes of a crisis worker, but elegant civilian attire that emphasized her ethereal beauty. Beside her stood a small figure that made both men's hearts skip simultaneously. The child was undeniably a blend of species. She possessed her mother's luminescent skin, though paler, and silver hair that held hints of human brown. But her eyes were unmistakably human in shape, though they held the violet depth of Velran heritage. She looked between the two men with curious intelligence, as if sensing the momentous nature of this meeting. "Elena," Kira said softly, placing a protective hand on the child's shoulder. "These are the men I told you about, Jake and David." The little girl studied them both with an intensity that seemed far beyond her years. When she spoke, her voice carried the musical quality of her mother's people, but the cadence was purely human. "Hello," she said simply. "Mama says one of you is my papa." The innocence of the statement hit both men like a physical blow, and Jake felt his knees weaken slightly. This beautiful, impossible child represented not just the consequences of their past actions, but the potential for a future none of them had ever imagined. The medical bay of Kepler 7 hummed with the quiet efficiency of advanced diagnostic equipment. Dr. Helena Voss, the station's chief medical officer, had prepared a comprehensive genetic analysis suite that would definitively determine Elena's parentage. The process itself was simple, a few cellular samples that would be processed overnight, but the implications were staggering. Jake sat in the observation lounge, watching Elena through the transparent walls as she played with a holographic puzzle that seemed to respond to her thoughts rather than her touch. The child's abilities had become apparent within hours of their arrival, and they were unlike anything he had encountered in his years of interspecies contact. "She's remarkable," David said, joining Jake at the window. "Look at how she's manipulating that program. She's not using the tactile interface at all." Indeed, Elena appeared to be solving the complex three-dimensional puzzle through pure mental focus, her violet eyes glowing faintly as geometric shapes rearranged themselves in midair. Velran children don't typically manifest psychic abilities until adolescence, Kira had explained earlier. Elena's human heritage seems to have accelerated her development. She can sense emotions, sometimes even surface thoughts. The revelation had unsettled both men. Not only might one of them be the father to this extraordinary child, but Elena herself might be able to sense their confusion and anxiety about the situation. "How are we supposed to handle this?" Jake asked, running his hands through his hair. "Whatever the results show tomorrow, everything changes." David nodded grimly. "And what about Kira? We can't just pretend the past didn't happen, but we can't go back either." Their conversation was interrupted as Kira approached, Elena skipping beside her. The child had apparently solved her puzzle and was now eager for new challenges. "Papa, Jake, Papa David," Elena said cheerfully, using the temporary titles Kira had taught her. "Will you show me your ship?" Both men exchanged glances. The casual way Elena addressed them both as potential fathers was endearing and heartbreaking simultaneously. "Of course, sweetheart," Jake said, crouching to Elena's level. "Would you like to see the bridge?" As they made their way through the station corridors, Elena chattered constantly. asking questions about everything from the artificial gravity systems to the color of distant stars. Her curiosity was infectious, and Jake found himself relaxing despite the circumstances. In the ship's observation deck, Elena pressed her small hands against the viewport, her eyes wide with wonder at the cosmic vista beyond. "It's so big," she whispered. "All those lights, they're like thoughts in a giant mind." David crouched beside her. "Each light is a star, and many of them have planets where people live, just like your mama's world and mine." "I know," Elena said matter-of-factly. "I can feel them sometimes, all the people thinking and dreaming." She turned to look at David with startling directness. "You dream about fixing things, making them better." David's breath caught. "You can sense that?" Elena nodded, then turned to Jake. "And you dream about protecting people, keeping them safe." Jake felt a chill run down his spine. The child's abilities were far more developed than anyone had realized. Later, that evening, as Elena slept in the guest quarters, Jake found himself alone with Kira on the station's observation deck. The awkwardness between them was palpable. 3 years of separation and unresolved feelings creating an almost physical barrier. "I should have told you," Kira said finally, her voice barely above a whisper. "When I realized what had happened, I should have contacted you both immediately." "Why didn't you?" Jake asked, though his tone held no accusation. Kira's luminescent skin flickered with emotion. "Because I was afraid. Afraid of disrupting your lives, afraid of the complications it would create, and afraid that you might try to take her from me." Jake moved closer, his hand finding hers on the railing. "Kira, whatever else has happened, whatever the test results show, I would never try to take Elena from you. You're her mother." Kira's violet eyes glistened with unshed tears. "But she needs her father too. Whichever one of you it is, she needs that connection." Their moment was interrupted as David joined them, carrying 3 cups of the station's synthetic coffee. The 3 adults stood together in comfortable silence, each lost in their own thoughts about the future. "Do you ever regret it?" David asked suddenly. "What happened during the plague?" Kira shook her head immediately. "Never, not for a moment. What we shared, it gave me strength when I needed it most, and it gave me Elena." Jake felt a familiar tightness in his chest. The time they had spent together during the crisis had been intense and meaningful, but he had convinced himself it was simply a product of extraordinary circumstances. Now facing the possibility that it had created lasting consequences, he was forced to confront feelings he had tried to bury. "The waiting is the hardest part," David admitted. "Not knowing changes everything and nothing simultaneously." As if summoned by their conversation, Elena appeared in the doorway, rubbing her eyes sleepily. Her hair caught the starlight streaming through the viewport, creating an almost ethereal glow around her small form. "I couldn't sleep," she said, padding over to them in her soft slippers. "Too many dreams." Kira immediately moved to comfort her daughter, but Elena surprised them all by walking directly to the space between Jake and David, taking a hand from each man. "It's okay," she said softly, her violet eyes reflecting the stars beyond. "I can feel your worries, but you don't need to be afraid. Love isn't about blood. It's about choice." The profound wisdom in the child's voice left all 3 adults speechless. Elena stood between the 2 men who might be her father, completely at ease, as if she already understood something that the adults were still struggling to grasp. As they stood together under the infinite canopy of stars, each of them began to realize that whatever the morning's test results revealed, their lives had already been irrevocably intertwined by forces greater than simple genetics. Dawn on a space station was an artificial construct, a gradual brightening of corridor lights that mimicked planetary sunrise. Elena woke early, her psychic sensitivity making her restless as the adults' anxieties permeated the station's atmosphere. The DNA results would be available within hours, but the little girl seemed more interested in the emotional undercurrents swirling around her than in questions of biological parentage. Jake found her in the station's small arboretum, sitting, cross-legged beneath a bioluminescent flowering tree that reminded him of Velran flora. She was humming softly, her voice harmonizing with the gentle vibrations of the plant's energy field. "Beautiful morning," he said, settling beside her on the synthetic grass. "It's afraid too," Elena said, touching the tree's bark with her small palm. "All the growing things here, they know something important is happening." Jake studied the child's profile, searching for familiar features. Her nose had a slight upturn that could have been his, but her chin held David's determined set. The uncertainty was maddening. "Elena, do you understand what the test will tell us?" She nodded solemnly. "Which one of you gave me half my blood?" But Mama explained that blood isn't the same as heart love. Before Jake could respond, David appeared with Kira close behind. The engineer looked as if he hadn't slept, his usually neat appearance disheveled. Kira's luminescent skin was dimmer than usual, a sign of emotional stress among her people. "The results are ready," Kira announced quietly. Elena rose gracefully, her small hand slipping into Jake's. "Before we go," she said, her violet eyes meeting each adult's gaze in turn, "I want to show you something." Without waiting for permission, she led them to the station's central hub, where a large holographic display usually showed navigation charts. Elena approached the control panel with the confidence of someone far older than her years. "I've been practicing," she said, her fingers dancing over the interface. "Mama taught me about our mind gifts." The holographic projector activated, but instead of displaying technical data, it began showing swirling patterns of light and color. As the adults watched in amazement, the patterns resolved into recognizable shapes, memories made visible through Elena's psychic abilities. The first image showed Jake during the plague crisis, working tirelessly in a medical facility. But Elena's rendering revealed more than visual memory. The display showed the emotional resonance of his actions, the protective love he felt for the Velran people glowing like golden threads around his figure. "You carry healing in your heart," Elena explained, her voice taking on an otherworldly quality. "Even when your hands cannot cure, your spirit mends what is broken." The scene shifted to show David bent over technical equipment, his brow furrowed in concentration. Again, Elena's psychic interpretation revealed the emotional truth beneath the surface, his deep satisfaction in solving problems, his joy in creating solutions that helped others. "You see harmony where others see chaos," she told David. "You make broken things whole again." Finally, the display showed Kira during those dark months, her grief and determination intertwining as she worked to save her people. Elena had captured her mother's essence, the fierce love that drove her to bridge two species and find hope in desperation. "And Mama," Elena said softly, "carries love that grows stronger when shared, not weaker when divided." The holographic display faded, leaving the four of them standing in contemplative silence. Elena's demonstration had revealed a truth that transcended genetics. Each adult had contributed something essential to the child's understanding of the world. Dr. Voss's voice over the comm system broke the spell. "The analysis is complete. Please report to Medical Bay 7. The walk to the medical bay felt like a march to judgment. Elena skipped beside them, seemingly unconcerned by the gravity of the moment, while the adults struggled with their churning emotions. Dr. Voss, an efficient woman in her 50s, waited with a holographic readout floating before her. The complex, genetic markers and probability matrices meant nothing to Jake, but the doctor's expression was clear enough. "The results are definitive," she began. "Based on chromosomal analysis and genetic markers, the biological father is—" "Wait," Elena interrupted, stepping forward with sudden authority. "Please wait." The adults turned to stare at the child, surprised by her commanding tone. Elena's violet eyes had begun to glow with psychic energy, and the air around her seemed to shimmer with invisible force. "I need to show you something else." "First," she said, her small hands reaching out to take Jake and David simultaneously. "Close your eyes." Reluctantly, both men complied. The moment Elena's psychic energy connected with theirs, the medical bay disappeared, replaced by a swirling maelstrom of shared consciousness. Through Elena's enhanced abilities, Jake suddenly experienced David's memories of working alongside Kira, the intellectual partnership, the mutual respect that had grown into deep affection. He felt David's wonder at Kira's intuitive understanding of complex engineering principles, the engineer's protective instincts when she pushed herself too hard. Simultaneously, David found himself experiencing Jake's memories, the commander's desperate need to shield others from harm, his profound connection with Kira as they worked to save lives together. He felt Jake's awe at Kira's strength in the face of her people's suffering, the way her compassion had called to something deep in his soul. Both men also experienced Kira's perspective, her gratitude for their help, her amazement at human determination and ingenuity, and yes, her genuine affection for both of them. Through Elena's psychic bridge, they understood that Kira's feelings hadn't been divided or diminished by encompassing two people, but rather had been expanded and enriched. When Elena released their hands, both men were breathing heavily, overwhelmed by the intensity of shared experience. "Do you see?" Elena asked, her childish voice somehow containing ancient wisdom. "Love doesn't subtract, it multiplies. Biology is just one thread in the tapestry." She turned to Dr. Voss with a smile that seemed to contain starlight. "Thank you for the test, but I already know what I need to know." Before anyone could stop her, Elena walked to the holographic display and casually switched it off, dismissing the genetic analysis that had seemed so crucial moments before. "I choose both," she announced simply. "One gave me life, but both gave me the example of what it means to be brave and kind and protective. That's what makes a papa, isn't it?" The profound silence that followed was broken only by Kira's soft gasp of understanding. Her daughter had done what the adults couldn't, found a truth that transcended conventional definitions of family. The aftermath of Elena's declaration settled over them like stardust, beautiful and transformative. In the quiet of the medical bay, with the genetic analysis dismissed and forgotten, 4 lives hung in perfect balance, waiting to see what shape their future would take. Dr. Voss, practical as always, was the first to speak. "Well," she said with a slight smile, "I've seen many unusual family configurations in my years at this station, but this might be the most elegant solution I've encountered." Kira moved to her daughter, kneeling to meet Elena's eyes. "Sweetheart, do you understand what you're saying? This isn't how families usually work." Elena's expression was serene, her violet eyes holding depths of understanding that seemed impossible for a 2-year-old. "Mama, when you were sick, worried during the bad time, didn't both Papa Jake and Papa David help heal your heart? Why should it be different now?" The simple logic was unassailable. Jake found himself remembering the moment in Elena's psychic sharing when he had experienced David's memories. There had been no jealousy, only recognition of shared values and complementary strengths. David, meanwhile, was marveling at how Elena's unusual abilities had allowed her to perceive emotional truths that the adults had missed. "But legally, socially," David began, then stopped as he realized how inadequate such concerns seemed in the face of Elena's wisdom. "We're not bound by Earth customs here," Jake said slowly, his commander's mind already working through practical implications. "And Velran society has always been more flexible about family structures." Kira nodded, her luminescent skin beginning to brighten as hope replaced anxiety. "Among my people, children born during crisis times are often raised by extended family groups. The concept of multiple parental figures isn't unknown." Elena clapped her hands together, the sound surprisingly musical. "See? We can make our own kind of normal." Over the following hours, as they walked through Kepler-7's corridors and talked about possibilities, the 4 of them began to sketch the outline of an unprecedented arrangement. Jake would maintain his command position, but accept a posting to the sector that included both Earth colonies and Velran territories. David could establish an engineering consultancy that would allow him to work from various locations. Kira would continue her diplomatic work, now with the addition of raising a child who might someday serve as a bridge between species. Most importantly, Elena would have the stability of a loving home with her mother while also maintaining meaningful relationships with both men who had shaped her genetic and emotional heritage. That evening, as artificial sunset painted the station's viewports in shades of amber and rose, the four of them gathered in the observation lounge one final time before Jake and David's departure the next morning. Elena sat curled in Jake's lap while David worked on a holographic sketch of a modified transport ship, one designed to accommodate their unusual family's need for mobility and together time. Kira watched them all with an expression of wonder, as if she couldn't quite believe that the crisis she had feared would destroy relationships had instead created something beautiful and new. "I have something for you," Elena announced suddenly, slipping from Jake's arms to retrieve a small object from her travel bag. It was a crystal formation, naturally occurring on Valethra Prime, that had been shaped into an intricate geometric pattern. "I made it myself," she said proudly, offering the crystal to both men simultaneously. "Mama taught me how to sing the rock into new shapes. It will help you remember us when you're far away." Jake and David each took hold of the crystal and immediately felt a warm, tingling sensation. Elena's psychic imprint had been woven into the very molecular structure of the stone, creating a connection that would allow them to sense her emotional well-being across vast distances of space. "Elena," David breathed, "this is extraordinary. How did you—" "Love finds a way," she said simply, echoing something Kira had told her during the plague crisis years ago. As the evening progressed, natural conversations gave way to deeper exchanges. Jake found himself talking with David about childhood experiences, discovering parallels in their backgrounds that explained their similar protective instincts. David shared his passion for engineering with Kira, finding that her intuitive understanding of energy patterns complemented his technical knowledge in unexpected ways. Most remarkably, all three adults found themselves able to discuss their past intimacies without jealousy or awkwardness. Elena's psychic sharing had created a foundation of mutual understanding that transcended conventional relationship boundaries. "I won't pretend this will be easy," Kira said as they prepared to part, "but Elena has shown us that some things are worth redefining what we consider possible." Jake nodded, his hand resting on Elena's silver hair as she dozed against his shoulder. "We'll make it work, whatever it takes." "The heart's choice," David added softly, unconsciously echoing Elena's earlier wisdom. 3 months later, Jake's modified ship docked at Valethra Prime for the first time since the plague crisis. Elena, now slightly taller and even more precocious, raced into his arms as if they had never been apart. The crystal she had given him had allowed him to follow her emotional development from across the galaxy, creating a bond that felt as natural, as if they had never been separated. David arrived a week later, his engineering consultancy having secured a contract to upgrade Velran medical facilities, a project that would keep him in the system for at least 6 months. Elena greeted him with equal enthusiasm, presenting him with a new crystal creation that sparkled with different frequencies than Jake's, perfectly attuned to David's more analytical mind. As the three adults watched Elena play in Kira's garden, each of them reflected on how fundamentally their understanding of family had been transformed. Biology had created the question, but love, in all its complex, multifaceted forms, had provided the answer. "She's going to change the world someday," Kira observed, watching her daughter coax impossible colors from ordinary flowers through some combination of psychic energy and pure joy. "She already has," Jake replied, his arm around Kira's shoulders while David's hand rested comfortably on his back. A casual intimacy that would have been impossible before Elena's heart choice had shown them new ways of being together. Elena looked up from her flowers, her violet eyes sparkling with mischief and wisdom. "Are you talking about me?" "Always," all three adults replied simultaneously, their voices creating a harmony that seemed to make the very air around them shimmer with possibility. In choosing both fathers, Elena had created something unprecedented, a family bound not by conventional structures but by conscious choice, mutual respect, and the revolutionary idea that love multiplies rather than divides. And in the years that followed, as Elena grew into her remarkable abilities and her unique perspective on relationships, she would indeed change the world, one heart choice at a time. The truth had left everyone speechless, just as Kira had predicted. But sometimes the most profound truths can only be spoken by children who haven't yet learned that some things are supposed to be impossible.